When God demonstrated his power over Pharaoh's hardness of heart, God was making a mockery of the false gods of Egypt. Please hear me right. When people worship the creation and ignore the Creator, the very creation that they worship is going to mock them. When people become preoccupied with the blessings that God gives them and ignore the blesser, those very blessings are going to curse them. When people become more focused on possessions and give no attention to the one who has given them these possessions, one day these possessions are going to make a mockery out of them. And this is what's happening here. In the first 9 of the 10 plagues, I'm only going to look at 9 today. We're going to leave the 10th to the next message. I want to deal with it alone. We are in the midst of a series of messages entitled A Portrait of a Hero. And looking at the life of Moses, the man of God, we're seeing God's hand and God's power manifested in the times when it's most desperately needed. And I believe with all my heart that the time is coming upon this nation when we're going to see the manifestation of God's power, because as the darkness gets darker, we're going to see the light becomes brighter. In fact, I've read recently that in Kyoto, Japan, there is an unusual place of worship. It's called the Temple of the Thousand Buddhas. There on display inside that shrine, more than 1,000 of likeness of Buddha. Each one of those 1,000 is just slightly bit different from the other. And they are there so that the devotee can come in and find the one that looks the most like the worshiper and then worship it. That's exactly why they have it that way. And I've thought about this, and I said, you know, self-worship is not really peculiar to Buddhism. Self-worship is rampant in the world today. Self-worship probably is the religion that is more common of folks all over the world than any other religion. It may be expressed differently. It may be packaged differently, but the message still the same. The content is the same, and the content is this: me, mine, myself, and I. That's it. Have you recognized this religion in our culture? And when Moses stood before Pharaoh and said to him, "Let my people go," at that moment of history, the land of Egypt was running rampant with idol worshiping and idolatry. Pharaoh's hardness of heart was a testifying to his unbelief. But there's something else I want to tell you. When God demonstrated his power over Pharaoh's hardness of heart, God was making a mockery of the false gods of Egypt. God is making a mockery of the false gods that we all worship every single day, but only those with spiritual eyes are able to see it. Please hear me right. When people worship the creation and ignore the Creator, the very creation that they worship is going to mock them. When people become preoccupied with the blessings that God gives them and ignore the blesser, those very blessings are going to curse them. When people become more focused on possessions and give no attention to the one who has given them these possessions, one day these possessions are going to make a mockery out of them. And this is what's happening here. In the first 9 of the 10 plagues, I'm only going to look at 9 today. We're going to leave the 10th to the next message. I want to deal with it alone. These first 9 of these plagues, we see God's judgment falling upon people who are worshiping the creation instead of the Creator. And after we look at these plagues, you're going to understand what did God mean in Exodus 12:12 when he said, "Against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord." The first of God's judgment was against the waters of Egypt. Aaron lifted his rod and smote the waters, and the water turned into blood, and the fish died, and the river stank. Egypt owes its very life to the river Nile. You have to understand that the river Nile, when the water comes, it irrigates their fields. The river Nile primarily was used as the only means of transportation from north to south and vice versa. From the Nile comes the fertile topsoil. The Nile is the key to life. You take away the key, there is no life, only death. And therefore they were worshiping this source of life, what they considered to be the source of life. Osiris, one of the chief gods of Egypt, was first and foremost the god of the Nile. To the gods of the Nile, offerings were made. To the gods of the Nile, human sacrifice, literally, were offered. To the gods of the Nile, priests bowed and worshipped in front of the Nile. And many times when you see, the Bible said Moses went out to see Pharaoh as he walked into the Nile, most likely he was going there to worship and bow before the Nile. Now the divine Nile in their hearts, which is the source of life, has become the source of death. And this plague lasted for 7 days. Pharaoh gets the magicians, and he said, can you do that? They did it. And then he does it again with the frogs. I'm going to come to that in a minute. You say, well, wait a minute. If the magicians are able to do it, what's so big about what Moses did? There's one thing the magicians could not do. They could not turn the blood back into water. They could not get rid of the frogs. Why? Satan does have power. Satan does have supernatural power, but it's a limited power, and it's under God's power, it's under God's control, and he can do nothing without God's permission. 7:22 of the book of Exodus, you read that Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he refused to let the people go. If you're marking the hardness of the heart, you can mark this one. Secondly comes the frogs. Aaron stretched his hand, and millions of frogs came all over the country. Probably they were croaking a storm. People couldn't even think with that noise. Ancient Egyptians worshipped the goddess Heket, H-E-K-T. Heket was always pictured with a normal head, but the body of a frog. Heket the frog was considered to be the goddess of fertility. God gave them frogs. In fact, frogs were literally coming out of their ears. I mean, they were kneading the flour to make bread, frogs in it. They were drinking water, it has frogs in it. They were sleeping on beds with these slimy, cold creatures on top of it. Somebody would say, what's wrong with these Egyptians? Are they stupid? Couldn't they spray them? Couldn't they just get a net and collect them and just throw them away? Or kill them or do something? No. Here's the irony. How can you kill the goddess of fertility? He'd destroy your nation. It is a sacrilege to kill frogs in Egypt at the time. Exodus chapter 8, verse 8. Pharaoh said to Moses, entreat your God to get rid of the frogs, and I will let you go. Here's cheap repentance number 2. Are you counting? False repentance number 2. I'm going to come to that. I'm going to explain a whole lot about that in a minute. But when God answered their prayers, when God answered their requests, Pharaoh refused to let them go, and his heart was hardened. Then comes the third plague. It's of gnats and lice. Now, the word here indicates is a type of insect that digs deep into the skin, and it irritates, and it aggravates, and is so painful. And this was the judgment upon the earth as God known as Gib. The very fertile land of Egypt that was worshipped by the citizens is now producing insects and swarms of flies which defiled their bodies and defiled them from, and even prevented the priests from functioning and offering their rituals. Still Pharaoh refused to surrender. Then comes the fourth plague. This plague is another form of an insect. This is very special insect to the Egyptians. And they worshipped it, and it's the beetle. And God said, I'm going to give you enough beetles to make you sick. And when they get over the supply of beetles, Pharaoh still hardened his heart. False repentance number 4. Fifthly comes another plague. This plague was against the cattle of the land. One of the most popular religious cults at the time was the cult of Apis, which is the bull god. You could go to any shrine of worship in ancient Egypt and there is a bull to be worshipped. In fact, these dead bulls were given an elaborate burials. They were buried in a vault there near Saqqara, near Memphis. It's against this depraved religious system that God's judgment came. And it's against the depraved, dead rituals of the Christian church, the professing church, that the judgment of God is coming.